Hey guys, this is Eckhart Slaughter. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars video. Today we'll be talking about a fan favorite vehicle, the AT-TE, and its evolution into the Empire's more famous walker, the AT-AT. I thought of this topic while reading Champions of the Force, which is book 3 of the Jedi Academy trilogy, which really shed some light, for me at least, onto a fairly obvious issue with the Empire's use of walkers. So, the AT-AT does have some very clear advantages over the AT-TE. Primarily, it has a really good field of view, it's really high so it can scope out the battlefield, it's very powerful, the hull is essentially impenetrable, especially by small arms fire, and perhaps most of all, it's just absolutely terrifying. The AT-AT looks like a gigantic metal beast, pushing unstoppably down the battlefield with massive cannons, just basically giving out destruction. Of course, the AT-AT can also navigate terrain pretty effectively, especially things like jungles. The large feet give it some stability, and it can basically blast through any sort of trees that get in its way, and we do see some of this during the Thrawn trilogy. So, as a very durable, albeit slow, but capable walker, the AT-AT is pretty good for transporting troops in certain circumstances. However, I will say I think the moniker all-terrain is perhaps a little too generous, especially when compared to the AT-TE. So after the fall of the Republic, the AT-TE, like most Republic military technologies, was essentially phased out of service, even more so than some vehicles like, say, the Juggernaut, which was changed but still heavily used. The Empire generally went for more obviously destructive but less nuanced vehicles, and that's why the AT-AT, of course, was more prominent. That being said, the switch really left a blind spot for the Empire. So let's look at the actual purpose of a walker, because walkers are a sort of weird creation, and there's honestly not always an obvious use for them. Generally, walkers are more reliable than something like a repulsor lift vehicle, i.e. a hovering vehicle. It's probably better for providing ground support than an aircraft. The legs allow it to navigate in terrain that would be impossible for a wheeled vehicle to navigate. And generally, I think the stability offers a lot in terms of a platform for very large weapons, like we see, for example, with the mass driver cannon of the AT-TE. Although walkers do have a lot of weaknesses, I'd say also that the legs themselves can perhaps be more armored or well protected than, say, wheels. So with that being said, I think if you're going to have a walker, you need to really lean into the attributes that the walker gives you, and the AT-TE I think does this quite well. The 6 legs give it a lot of stability and also allow it to literally scale vertical cliffs. We see that in the Clone Wars. And I mean, the AT-TE is an incredibly practical vehicle. It's low to the ground, it's not designed to be terrifying, but is, because it's brutally effective. It's armored, but not to the point where it can only move very slowly. It has versatile weapons capable of fighting off soldiers and also armor, and it can be thrown into basically any situation. But what I'm really focused on here is that bit about movement. It does all of this while being able to move around the battlefield like not only no other walker, but no other vehicle, period. What we see at the Battle of Teth, where the AT-TEs are literally scaling a vertical cliff face, is fairly dramatic. But the AT-TE can truly bring all of its firepower regardless of terrain, especially when you consider its ability to be dropped by something as light as, say, a LAT gunship. But we've also seen AT-TEs scale asteroids, we've seen them used as dropships in the Clone Wars, and just generally they take the idea of a walker, which is inherently ridiculous, and make it practical. Almost all of this was abandoned with the AT-AT, which does have 4 large legs, but really is far clumsier. And I think part of the problem with the AT-AT is that it tried to take all of the Republic's walkers and turn them into one. The Republic had, for example, the AT-TE, which we've been talking about, but also various transport walkers like the AT-OT, or heavy artillery like the SPHA. The Empire wanted to be very uniform, they wanted to clearly seem like an infinite unstoppable force, so they took many of these vehicles and just put them into one, while losing the real nuanced quality of each one. and I think we could probably spend some time also talking about the SPHA or the various other Republic walkers which were left to history, but the ATTE to me is really the biggest loss here. Not only is it movable, but it also better directly supports troops and infantry with its laser cannons than something like an AT-AT. So the reason why I was thinking about this when reading Champions of the Force is because in that book we learn that the Empire has actually been working on a vehicle which can scale cliffs. That's the MT-AT, which looks like a giant spider. The MT-AT is used quite heavily during the Battle of Anoth, and that's in 11 ABY, and the Walker had only just finished its research and construction. Basically, it seems like the Empire invented a problem for themselves which they had to fix later on, because the ATTE certainly could have scaled the cliffs like the MT-AT had. The ATTE is also a much more traditional walker, with the MT-AT being sort of more like a droid and without the real sturdy hard points of the Republic walker. I don't know if the technology that went into the ATTE's legs was somehow lost for time, or if Imperial engineers just thought they could do better, but I don't think they did here, especially given the fact that the MT-AT also heavily uses droid brains and just generally doesn't seem to be very practical. Had the Empire just introduced the AT-AT, which I understand, but kept the ATT as a secondary walker, I think they could have avoided a lot of problems, not only having to make new vehicles, but if you look at, say, the battle plans for Hoth, we can see that the Empire was forced to follow the land when attacking the rebel base, and they certainly lost a lot of time doing so. They had to move between the natural breaks in the cannons, and even while doing so, they actually lost a few walkers to the elements. Had the ATTEs been available, I think it's quite possible that they could have more effectively navigated the route and maybe even flanked the Alliance by passing through some sort of territory that was too difficult for the much larger walkers. We also see when they travel the North Ridge that they're basically forced to move in a zigzag pattern just because of the verticality, and that's really not an issue with the ATTE. So I get it. Keep AT-ATs, they're scary, and they are effective, especially when the enemy's right in front of you, but also keep ATTEs. They work well together and they serve an entirely different function. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Today's question comes from Movie Guy Productions, who says, do you think the fleet of Zeistons at Exegol could have beaten the Yuuzhan Vong's invasion fleet? Definitely. The fleet at Exegol is much larger than the New Republic had in Legends, and as I've said a few times, the main issue with the Yuuzhan Vong is that the New Republic did not handle the initial stages of the invasion well enough. They let the Yuuzhan Vong gain territory. With the Zeistons, I mean, they could have just blasted their world ships quite easily, and I mean, as long as whichever commander was taking care of the invasion was competent, it wouldn't be a problem. I mean, Zeistons can basically handle anything in Star Wars. The issue, of course, is just that they were caught with their pants down, essentially. But that's all I have for you guys. I hope everyone's staying safe and staying indoors. Remember, wash your hands, don't go out unless you really need to, especially around people, and of course, may the Force be with you.